Hello and welcome to part 43 of this video series. In this video, we will continue our discussion on exception handling. I have created this short program which will actually divide two numbers. First, we are asking the user enter the first number, then whatever the user is inserting, that input we are converting it to an integer and storing in fn variable means first number. Similarly, we are taking the second number and storing it in sn variable, and after that we are creating a variable result and we are dividing first number and second number, and whatever the result we get we are printing it out of the console. So let's run this program and see what is happening. It is asking me the first number. Let's give 27, second number 3, and we are getting the result 9 as expected. But let's suppose the user is not giving proper input. For example, for the first number, they are providing some very large number which cannot be converted to an integer because an integer variable has a specific range. If you want to know about the range of integer and other variables, you can go through this video series and find inbuilt data types of C# where I have explained what is the range of integer. So here, if we give this big number, C# will not be able to convert this number to an integer and it will throw the exception here. Let's press the enter button. Now you can see we are throwing the exception, overflow exception. Value was either too large or too small for int32. There could be one other case. Let's say the number provided by user is correct first time, but second time the user is giving 0. As we all know, we cannot divide any number with 0. This time we will throw attempted to divide by 0 error. This is divide by 0 exception. As we have seen in the last video, to avoid this exception, we can use try catch block. So let's go ahead and wrap this program in try catch block. So first, let me add a try block and put all this code inside this. And after that, I can have a catch block. And let's say I will give exception here, ex. If you look at the exception message, it has access to multiple properties. First one is the message property. Using this property, we can get the error message. Second one is the stack trace. Stack trace will give us the more information about the error. Along with that, it will tell us at which line number and in which file the error has occurred. So let's say I will choose the stack trace and print it out. Let's give 10 and 0. This time you can see the stack trace here is demo.main. It means we are in demo namespace, then the demo class, then in the main method at line number 32 we have received this particular error. So if you see the line number 22, at line number 22 we are trying to divide the number, that's why we have received divide by 0 exception. Okay, let's say I change this exception type to divide by 0 exception. Okay, so this time I'm using a more specific class. Instead of using a generic exception class, I am explicitly mentioning the class name divide by 0 exception. Let's see what will happen if I run the program. Now if I enter 0, 10 and second number as 0, you will notice we are able to handle the exception properly and application is not crashing. So that's fine. If we are getting the divide by 0 exception, we are able to catch it here. But let's suppose we are getting some different kind of exception. Let's say I give a big number and try to convert it to an integer type. That time we are getting the exception. This time we are not going to the catch block and handling the exception. The application has crashed and we are getting exception unhandled, and we are getting value was too large or too small for int32, because in the catch block we have specified divide by 0 exception, but actually we have received overflow exception. So that's why this will not go inside the catch block and the application will crash. So guys, it is important to mention the particular exception that can be thrown from the try block. And if you notice here, divide by zero exception, if I go to the source code of it by right clicking on it and go to definition, you will notice the class divide by zero exception is inherited by arithmetic exception. So let's check the source code of this also by going to the definition. And if you see, the arithmetic exception is inherited from system exception. So let's check the source code of this class also. You will notice this class is inherited from exception class. In C#, every exception class is inherited from exception class. At the root level, we have the exception class. If we go to the definition of exception class, you can see whatever code is written in the exception class. Let's close it and come back to our class. So in order to handle the overflow exception also, we can add one more catch block. Let's copy paste it, and this time let's mention it overflow exception. And let's print out the message instead of the stack trace. And if I run the application and provide some big number, this time we have handled the exception properly and application is not crashed. We have printed the message also, value was either too large or too small for an integer. So this is how you can club multiple catch blocks with one try block. And if you don't want to specify any exception type, if you are not sure which kind of exception you will receive, you have two options. Either you can use the most generic class, that is exception class at the end, like this. This way, if our application throws any kind of exception, and we know every exception is inherited from exception class, so that particular exception will come to this class. The exception will check if it is of divide by zero. If no, then it will check if the exception is of overflow type. If no, then it will fall to the exception class. And guys, if you don't want to use the exception object in the catch block, what you can do, you can simply remove this exception object from here and just directly print out the catch block. If you notice, you are getting the compilation error here. You don't have the access to the ex object. Now you can remove it and just put some generic message. Some error has occurred. Okay, so in case you don't want to specify the exception class and you don't want to use the exception object, you can ignore that and just print out a generic message if you want. So let's remove this and see if we are coming to this block or not. If I provide a big number here, you can see we are getting this some error has occurred message. Okay, let's remove this particular catch block. Let's go back to slides now. On this slide, you can see some of the important points about the exception that we have seen in this video. An exception is actually a class that derives from System.Exception class. If you remember, we have seen how all the exception class are inherited from a parent class exception. The System.Exception class has several useful properties that provides valuable information about the exception. That can be message that will give us the error message, the stack trace that will provide the error message along with that will give us the line number where the exception has occurred. Specific exception will be caught before the base general exception. If you remember from the video, if we have a generic exception like this, and if we are getting a divide by zero exception, so that will be caught first and we will not execute any other catch block. That's what this point says. Specific exception will be caught before the base general exception. So specific exception block should always be on top of the base exception block. Otherwise, you will encounter a compilation error. In Visual Studio, if you try to move this particular block above the specific exception blocks, you will get the compilation error. If I try to build the application, you can see the error message, a previous catch block was already catches all the exception of this for a super type, because all the exception will fall to this particular block. Now whatever code is mentioned in the specific exception blocks, that will never be executed. So it is not allowed to provide the generalized type of exception on the top. We can put it at the bottom. Okay. And it is a good practice to always release resources in finally block, because finally block is guaranteed to execute irrespective of whether there is an exception or not. And guys, remember, finally block will execute even if we get exception in the catch block. Let me show you how it will work. Let's say in the divide by zero exception, what happens? You are throwing a new exception here. Throw new system exception. So what is happening here? If we are receiving a divide by zero exception, what we are doing, we are printing that error message, and after that, we are throwing a system exception to prove that if we get a exception in the catch block, even in that time we will execute the finally block. Okay, let's run this program in run mode. So I will press Ctrl F5. Let's provide the first number as 25 and second number as 0. You can see we are getting the exception attempted to divide by 0, but if you notice, we are still getting I am in the final block. So guys, whether we get the exception in catch block or not, we will always execute finally block. So it is a good practice to release all our resources in finally block. That's it for this video guys. In the next video we will learn about inner exceptions.